We're just going to quickly introduce ourselves and then we'll start with the presentation. But I am Casey Meister and I am the Workforce Development Coordinator for Westside Early Childhood. And so I do recruiting and onboarding and training for our new staff. And I was previously a site director as well.
And I'm so grateful that you guys are all here with us today. I'm Carly Matthews. I'm our professional development specialist and coach in Westside Early Childhood Centers. Like Casey, I also was a site director and teacher prior to this role. And I'll tell you a little bit about more of what I do in my position as well in our presentation.
Hi there, I'm Julie Elke. I am the program director for Westside Early Childhood Centers, and I oversee basically all of the operations. So we have, and I'll tell you in a little bit, we have 12 different sites. I oversee those things. So I'm really excited that you guys came. We were talking earlier, we're like, what if nobody comes to hear our story? So I'm really excited to share it with you. It has been almost a 7-year journey for us. So this is not anything that has just happened overnight. We've definitely grown with the process. I think even the state has grown with the process and changed kind of how they help schools and centers and stuff like that come on board with that too. So please, we want to make this as interactive as possible too. So if you have a question, please let us know and we would be happy to answer it as we go. So we can make this as informal as you'd like. So I'm just going to get started by telling you a little bit about our program. Like I started out, we have 12 different locations. 3 of those we have school age only sites. So when I say 12, 3 of those don't really play into this journey. We do have 9 that have early childhood programming at them, and we range from age 18 months through 5 is what we take in those. So we have our toddler, our preschool, and our 4-year-old or kind of pre-K programs in those programs. Not all of them have all of those. Some of them just have a 4-year-old program. Some of them just have a preschool program. Some have toddler, preschool, and 4-year-old. So it's a mixture of them altogether. One of the things that makes us a little bit different is that we are not part of the school district. So when you say Westside Community Schools, that does not include our program. We operate under the Westside Community Schools Foundation. That's kind of the umbrella, and we operate underneath that. And so we are a parent-paid weekly tuitions to come to our program. We accept Title 20. We have some assistance programs that we can help families that need help as far as paying for tuition, but it is not a taxpayer paid program. So everything that we do, we have to come up with in budget and figure out how to pay for it and do those things. So that's probably the biggest difference that we wanted to make sure that everybody understood, that we're not just part of a K-12 school district. So we are licensed by DHHS. We participate in Step Up to Quality. Most of our centers are NACCE accredited. We have a new one that has not gone through that process just yet, but it is a priority for us. Yeah, so that's kind of us in a nutshell is kind of our structure as to where we are at, to give you a little snapshot of that. So we do. So how that works is we do work closely with the school district. So I just said that we're not part of it, but we work very closely with them. And we have the school district will take anybody that lives in the district. They are identified. They work with them. They have the special ed team, and they will write and administer the IEP. Now this has kind of evolved over the years too. It used to be that all special ed children would come and they would be dispersed amongst our programs. The special ed department has now started kind of their own, they do a peer model. And so they are taking some of the more profound behaviors or disabilities or things like that will be in the pyramid model. And the foundation program will get some more that maybe they started out in the pyramid or the peer model program. And so they've built skills and can, participate in a more of a regular ed type classroom. We get some of maybe the speech and language students as well too. And just depending upon the needs of the child too. So it can vary. Each classroom might have 1 to 2. The district does provide a para with that child when they are placed in our classrooms. So great question. Did I miss anything about that? No. Okay. All right. So we're going to just highlight where we're going on our journey here. And then Casey and Carly will definitely get into more details about it. But we started this journey, like I said, almost 7 years ago. And we got this opportunity because the district came to us and said, hey, let's partner. The state has this great program with Pyramid. Let's see how we can work together. So we applied. And because of the support of the district, we were accepted and were able to participate. And so since then, I think it has transformed our program. And I think they would support me with that. But, I think our teachers are more competent now. Our families are engaging, although I know anybody that works in this field, that's always a challenge to keep them engaged. But I do think that we have more of that since we've started this. So today we're going to kind of talk about the things that we use along this journey to be able to implement the process. So that starts with a benchmarks of quality, which was a tool that we actually came to Kearney and we learned how to use it. It marks out different things that you should be doing in order to be practicing the pyramid models. It also gives a leadership team that's kind of guiding the implementation, gives them a roadmap as to, okay, this is where you need to start. You need to get staff buy-in, you need to get family buy-in, and it goes on. And for 20, is there 27? I don't know how many are on there. There's quite a few different benchmarks on there. So we also learned about, there's a tool called the Teapot, which is Teaching Pyramid Observation Tool. And so each of our teachers, we have 26 different classrooms, and each of our teachers one teacher in each classroom receives the Teapot, and they get that in the fall and then again in the spring. And depending upon how they score on that, Carly will tell you a little bit more about their training or professional development that happens there. We're also going to talk about partnerships, how that looked, how we got staff buy-in, how we continued to engage families, how we continued to build that relationship with our school district. So how we keep that partnership going and making sure that we have their support. We're going to talk about professional development, what that looks like in relation to the Teapot. How we help do that. Also around that benchmarks of quality, how that it helps us kind of target overall PD, not individually specific PD. We'll look at some data points, especially the Teapot and the BOQ. And then Casey last is going to go over our implementation process. And so that piece involves looking at the benchmarks of quality. It looks at, we'll talk a little bit about what a BIR is, and then our pyramid leadership team, which I think is one of the keys to our success, is how we have brought together the pyramid leadership team, which is representative of, we have early childhood administrators on there, there's site directors, there's teachers, and then district administrators too, that really help pull it together. So to start, when we started on our journey here in Kearney, we went through this benchmarks of quality, which is oh, Carly, you told me there was a pointer, and now top one. So this one right here is the benchmarks of quality. And so when you go through it, you read the benchmark, and then you determine if that is in place in your organization, if it's partially in place or it's not at all. And so once you do that, then you get your score as to, if you're 90% in place, you're 85%. And the first time I think we did it, we were like 30% in place, something like that. So, and as we've gone through it, it's definitely something that we always kind of look back and think about, well, how hard are we being on ourselves sometimes with these things? Because I think you can look at each individual benchmark a little bit different. And so that's something that we continue to tweak. And there's some things that, even after 7 years that we haven't completely marked as in place, because we still feel like we're working on them. So then also this other one here is the teapot. It's just a quick snippet of the things. And so there is a whole list that teachers are have an observation, and they come in and they, do they have routines and schedules listed? Are your rules posted? The amount of time you're spending at circle time, all of those things are observed, and the teacher gets the feedback on that. And so our goal is 80% is meeting fidelity on that. And so that's our goal, is to get our teachers to that point. And we'll share some data around that here in a little bit as well. Okay. Is that better? It needs to be by my mouth. Okay. All right. So family feedback is also something that we have included in on our journey. And so we wanted to make sure, as we were putting as much effort and manpower and money into this project, we wanted to make sure that the families were getting benefit out of it as well too. And so these are a couple of quotes that that we have received from families on that. We have regularly solicited family feedback throughout the journey, either by surveying, sometimes during parent-teacher conferences, we'll ask, for their feedback, just so that we know where we need to increase or decrease, or maybe just even understanding where the families are at as far as social and emotional development and skills. So we can figure that out. The NCPMI has created a wonderful resource for families that mirror the language and the skills that we practice in the classroom that go along with the pyramid module. And so those come in different forms. We've got some electronic versions of some backpack series. They will send home information about problem solving, social stories, feelings posters, Tucker the Turtle. I'm sure everybody's heard about that one. We have resources that we can share with those families that they can do at home as well, so that they're seeing the same thing in the classroom as they are at home. And there's lots more as well that we have shared as well. So supporting families and using pyramid model strategies has helped children in our program be more successful in their social interactions and sets them up for a smoother transition into kindergarten and beyond. And so one of the things when we first started this is we had to set kind of our 3 Bs, or our behavior expectation. And so we worked with our district as well. And so they had already set for PBIS, had set be safe, be respectful, be responsible. So we just adopted that same thing. So those are things that we set further behavior expectations on, but those are kind of our top 3 that we try and stay consistent with. Our elementary and our district partners. Oh, I'm sorry. I am done with my turn. It is Carly.
All right. So Julie kind of hit on some of this information already, but throughout our journey, our district partnership has been really important to our success. So I don't know if you remember the slide that had kind of a map on it. Most of our early childhood centers are located within the elementary buildings, which helps really for a lot of purposes. That transition is a lot smoother for some of those children. But we are able to serve children 18 months all the way to 12th grade under this umbrella of pyramid and PBIS with those same rules of be safe, be respectful, be responsible. And some of the other benefits that maybe haven't been mentioned yet are when we do have children who maybe do need a little extra support, or we are identifying maybe some things that are flagging us, it's a lot easier because we have this district partnership. It runs a lot smoother. We're able to help get the supports needed. We work really closely on our pyramid leadership team. We have an early childhood psychologist from the district. We have our early childhood special education coordinator as part of our pyramid leadership team. And so getting those services for our learners comes a lot easier. And we follow those overarching expectations across all of our schools. So our children, our toddlers, they can start to tell you that they're being safe. And then when you go into a 12th grade classroom, they're also practicing being safe. It looks a little different, right? But same language. And then we, in the last couple of years, have started implementing Second Step, which is a social emotional curriculum. We use that in our early childhood classrooms and now our elementary buildings and middle school buildings, I think, also use the Second Step curriculum. And we this year are adopting it into our before and after school programs too. So a lot of that similar social emotional language throughout the course of children's experience in education with us. A big part of the success too was our professional development. Like Julie mentioned, we're on our own, so we have to figure out how we're going to fund these things. And our programs operate from 7 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock in the evening. So our teachers don't necessarily have like plan time, in the afternoon or morning or afternoons where kids get out early. So we really have to be creative with how we get professional development to our teachers. So we knew that was a priority for us. And so starting in 2014, we determined that we needed to have some days where we close our centers and we just provide professional development. And so in the 2015 school year, we set aside 3 professional development days for our early childhood and Club 66, that's what we call our before and after school program, to participate in pyramid module training. And they would attend these trainings together and they would learn pyramid model practices. They'd create plans for how they would begin kind of phasing pyramid model into their programs and then and what using these skills looks like. And then that training was facilitated by our NDE coach at the time, because when you went through the pyramid model, when we did, our cohort was assigned an NDE coach. And so she was wonderful and helped provide those trainings for us that first year to get everybody on our team trained. And then since then, we've had several different ways that we've trained new staff, which we've had to be really innovative and creative in how we do that, because we want to get everybody to buy in with pyramid, and they weren't part of maybe that first journey. So we have done things like we still continue to have 3 of our days where we close, but we have tried doing like online training modules where teachers participate in training online, and then we assigned them like a pyramid ambassador is what we called them, which were kind of like our pyramid experts at each of our sites, and they would check in with them to see how the trainings were going and what they were trying in their classrooms. We also did like a modified TLC, which is we had teachers come together in the afternoon, sometimes during rest time, just small groups, and we'd learn content together, and then they'd go back to their classrooms, they'd try it out in their classrooms, they'd film themselves, which they had to be really vulnerable. It wasn't super favorable all the time, but eventually they grew to love it and really had this strong support for each other, because they'd come and they'd give each other feedback about what they were doing in their videos. And we'd have like a specific lens that we were looking through during those times together. And then our other group was our teapot group. So teapot is how we look and see what pyramid model practices look like in each of the classrooms. And then the teachers who received that teapot, we would meet in the afternoon and go through what would it look like to meet all of these criteria on the teapot? So we break it down. What does the schedule look like? Why is this important? How could it look different? What would it look like in your classroom? And it was great because it was training and networking. And then that's actually where we saw the biggest success in teapot scores was after the teachers participated in teapot group. So that was really beneficial for implementation of pyramid model in our classrooms too. Oh, there's a question. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. So the question was, on the 3 days that we close every for professional development, is it just for our teaching staff or is it for our aides or paras as well? And it's for all of our staff. We encourage our site directors, our teachers, our paras, our before and after school. We really think it's important that everybody gets the training. And so that's why we close completely down with the expectation that you'll participate in this training. So good question. Thank you. Okay. And then as we were going through this process, we realized, wow, we really need a person who can facilitate these trainings. And so that's how I am in this role. So the professional development specialist was created, position was created, and I am trained in pyramid module training. So now I conduct pyramid module training with all new staff that come on board. And we continue to, I'm a teapot observer too, so I continue to do those observations in classrooms and meet with teachers and provide feedback. Yeah, we also had I'm going to go to the next slide and talk about, I think, the next few things. So our professional development, because there's these pretty pictures on here. So our professional development, our pyramid leadership team created these mini modules too. So they took content from the teapot and from pyramid modules, and we broke it down and made just like short little, you can do them by yourself, you can do them with a small group, review them at any time, little modules that have videos in them and pictures and real life examples. So that's been a great resource to have as well that's available for our teachers. We provide our pyramid module training up here. They're making a brain with Play-Doh. And then we've also started to incorporate it into our new employee orientation. So as people join our team, they get little tastes of pyramid model in their new employee orientation. We kind of have it broken out by each week. And that looks like there's like videos and training modules on that Casey's put together. And then we encourage them to look for this in their classrooms too, by having an observation where they're looking for specific practices. So we have like a form that they go into classrooms and they look to see how that looks in the classroom, and then meet with their site director to kind of follow up. So we're really trying to be intentional with introducing pyramid right away instead of waiting down the road. Yeah. So I went through the training to be a reliable teapot observer. So I conduct half of our teapots, and then this last year, our early childhood psychologist also went through the training, so she can also do the observations too. So we kind of split them up, and she does half and I do half, and then we do the debriefs together. Yeah. In the past, prior to us, we would swap services, which was another thing that was helpful. So we swapped with Papillion and with Bellevue at one point. So they did our teapots for us, and then I went and did their teapots for them. So that was also one thing that we tried out, although that can logistically be a little bit challenging sometimes. So yeah, so it made more sense for us to do it internally at this point. And now that I've changed from being the classroom teacher coach, and I work with the directors now, it works a little bit better, because when I was the teapot observer and the coach, that kind of created an interesting dynamic, but this way it works. This way it works well. And I think that's what I wanted to include there. Okay. So coaching, which we were just kind of touching on right there. So in 2014, this is when we had our NDE assigned coach. She did the training for our whole organization. She did the teapot observations in our classrooms. She would observe in our classrooms, provide feedback, and then help us to create action plans. And then she actually kind of helped Casey and I learn what she does. And so she started to show us how she coaches. And so we had the opportunity to learn a little bit from her, and then eventually it transitioned into that responsibility falling on us, and she kind of fell off. And so, which I think is the goal. It would be nice to keep your NDE coach forever, but that's not probably not feasible. So we transitioned to having an internal coach, and then that looked like observing in classrooms, giving feedback to teachers, following up on teapots, and providing that individual feedback, and holding that teapot group for those teachers that went through the teapot observation. And we maintained that for a while. COVID made things tricky, so we went to virtual coaching and had teachers be more reflective about what they were doing and kind of share that. They would complete the inventory of practice, evaluate what they thought they were doing well, what they wanted to work on, create action plans from there. And then we'd just kind of check up throughout that time where we couldn't go into classrooms necessarily. And then in 2022, we decided to try something new, making the site directors the coaches of the classrooms. They have great relationships with the teachers. They get to see their teachers in practice all the time. And as we're learning more and more about the benefits of coaching, we're understanding that that format of coaching and providing feedback is where we really see teacher growth. So we wanted to support our directors in that role. So now I get to coach with the directors, and then the directors coach the teachers. And that's kind of what we're rolling with right now. So with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Casey.
Okay, I am going to talk a little bit more about our team. So we have broken up into kind of our leadership team and then our site teams. I know we've talked a little bit about the leadership team already, but we have representation from every site. It could be an administrator, a teacher, or we have an elementary principal on our team as well. We also have our early childhood school psych, special education coordinator, and we are working on getting a parent or family member representative on our leadership team as well. And as Julie and Carly have mentioned along the way, the leadership team has really been instrumental in helping guide our way and keeping us on track. So we have meetings monthly, sometimes virtual, sometimes in person, depending on what's the time of year. But during those meetings, we are very intentional about reviewing any data, kind of helps to inform our decisions to move forward. So things that we use are the BIRs, which we'll talk about in more detail here in a little bit. The ASQs, so we have parents complete ASQ 3 and ASQ SE at the time of enrollment. So we use that data especially at the beginning of the year, the new school years, to help the teachers kind of focus in and kind of know areas of strength and maybe areas for growth for particular students. And we also will review teacher survey data or family survey data during those meetings. We take a look at kind of like overall TPOT data as an organization to help identify areas for professional development or like mini modules that we can be facilitating at sites. And then we also look at our teaching strategies goal data as well. Within our leadership team, we do also sometimes form subcommittees to work on specific benchmarks. So each year, as we are reviewing our benchmarks of quality and identifying kind of the priority areas that we want to work on, we will create subcommittees who then can meet and, do some more focused work on helping work towards getting those benchmarks in place. Thank you. And again, the leadership team just really helps drive the organization-wide implementation, keeps us on track. So with the implementation or with the leadership team, then we also separately have the site teams. So as you can imagine, the site team would be made up of the site directors, whoever their leadership team representative might be, plus also the teachers, maybe any teacher who's already completed a TPOT or completed that cycle of module training and coaching with Carly. So what we are working towards is really helping to build the capacities of our site teams. So rather than relying on just the leadership team, we want to really help build the capacity of our site teams. So sometimes our site teams can be, our teachers, but we also have assistant teachers and support staff who may, we hire 16-year-old high school students. So sometimes we really want to include them on all of the professional development and all of those types of things too, to just really help provide that consistency across a child's whole day. Any questions about teams? Okay. So implementation wise, in the beginning, we really just stuck with the basics. We started with the critical practices, and we really relied on the TPOT to help us identify which criteria to focus on, and that kind of helped guide our implementation as we rolled it out to staff. So when you initially are looking at a TPOT, it can be very overwhelming, and you might not know where to start. So we just really kind of broke it down and started with the basics. But then we also have been using creative curriculum. And so that kind of helped us to know how we were supporting our early childhood learners in the area of social emotional growth by using that teaching strategies goal data. And now we also have the second step curriculum that we use to help support them in that area as well. BIRs. So the BIRs, is anybody familiar with BIRs? Some of you, okay, some of you not, so I'll kind of explain it. But a BIR is a behavior incident report, and it is something that we use to help track when there may be persistent challenging behaviors in a classroom. So in the beginning, and we've done this a few different ways across time, in the beginning, we used the paper version. And so teachers, we gave them the paper BIR, they would fill it out, turn it in, and we collected the data that way. We, along the way, moved to an electronic version. So they had a tab on their iPad, they could click it, fill out the form, and then the data went straight to Carly. And then we kind of went back to the paper just because we realized that it was just for tracking purposes a little bit easier for Carly to take that paper data and then convert it for the spreadsheet, I think. But we also learned that teachers along the way, their understanding of why they were filling out BIRs changed too. So in the beginning, maybe it was a little muddy for them, and we didn't have a clear expectation for when they would complete a BIR. But now we have kind of established more of a, what's the word I want to use? More of a streamlined process for making sure teachers understand when they should fill out a BIR and why they're using it. And so again, along our journey, data has become a really important thing for us. So teaching the teachers and assistant teachers and support staff how to do that has been important. Our expectation posters, there's a few examples there for you to see, but we started out again really simple, but along the way, we make sure now that we regularly seek the students' input on what rules are important for our classroom. What kinds of things can we do to be safe at circle time, or how can we be responsible when we're on the playground? So we make sure we ask those questions to the kids, and not just at the beginning of the year, but throughout the year as well. Oh, and we're also working towards involving more of the staff in reviewing the matrix, and also establishing a matrix for the adults in the classroom too. So the students have their expectations, but we also want to make sure that the teachers are all on the same page with their expectations as well. So that's something that we're working towards. We'll talk about that in more detail in an upcoming slide. And then also, every staff member, we have them complete an inventory of practice to help them identify areas of strength and growth, but for themselves individually and also for their teaching teams as well. Yes. Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So the question was, how soon in the school year would we start tracking BIR data for a student? And I think when we kind of more formally created our process this year, Carly, do you want to talk about that?
So we do have a training that we ask our teachers to complete. It's just an hour, and they actually practice filling out a BIRs based on videos so that we are consistent about what we are filling out BIRs for. But in our pyramid leadership team, that has been a big discussion about when do you fill out a BIR? And so we kind of outlined what would be criteria that you would fill out a BIR no matter what. And we also make it a requirement that if you are filling out a BIR, you're talking to the parents as well. You're letting them know. And it might just be one BIR. It might be a total fluke thing. Like that kid might have just had a day, right? And never again. And that's fine. That's still good data for us to collect. And so we kind of set what those parameters were. And I would say that our August usually doesn't have very many BIRs, and then we really start to see them kind of rolling in September. So I think our teachers also want to give kids a chance to get comfortable in their settings and really find out who they are. So that would be generally what I would say about that.
Yeah. So the question is, what kind of data do we collect or do we fill out for on the BIR? So I'm going to let Carly answer that question again too.
I would be happy to share what we use. If you would, I don't know if I have, is it on here? Well, we generally ask, I don't know if we have it on here, but I can tell you so on the BIR, there is the time of occurrence, the date, the type of challenge, the description of the behavior, preceding event. And then we have kind of categories of like what type of behavior it falls into, who was involved, how it was resolved, the activity, what was happening during that time. Teacher response, and if there was any administrative follow-up. So and I think that's mostly what's on that. We have added we started using the BIRs from NCPMI, but then we added a few things that we thought were important for us to collect. So that's like the preceding event wasn't on their BIR, and neither was the amount of time. So we added those two things specifically, and then a description of behavior too, so that they could add additional comments as well.
Okay, so moving into a little bit more about some data. So this slide depicts the teapot data that we've collected over the course of our journey. So if you see at the very beginning, we had cohorts of teachers. So the fall of 2015 was when we did our first teapot, and that cohort of teachers at that time, the average score was a 55%. And then over the course of time, their scores steadily increased. And by the end of their cohort, which was the spring of 2017, the average TPOT score was 87%, which was great. So everybody was at or above fidelity, which is 80%. And then you see a dip, which is when our second cohort of teachers started. So when that second cohort started, they started at a 62%, and their scores increased pretty quickly. So by the spring, they were just within that same school year, they were already meeting fidelity. And then you'll see a little gap there, but then the spring of the following school year, that same group of teachers was TPOTted, and they were again at fidelity or above there as well. And then in the fall of 21 was when our next cohort of teachers were TPOTted. And you could see that each time a new cohort started, their initial TPOT score was higher each time. So that kind of told us that that across time with, implementation and with the training that staff were able to pick up those practices a little bit quicker and have, a faster, it just became natural for them. It was just part of our everyday, classroom practices. Yeah, good question. So the question was, were the cohorts across sites, or were they just at certain specific sites? So we had each cohort was a teacher from each classroom, at least one at every school. So, and some sites had 2 to 3, depending on what programs they had. Okay. This next chart shows benchmarks of quality. So starting out, you can see we were at 19% in 2015. So that really helped us, know that we've got some work to do. By 2016, we had made pretty good progress. And then from 2017 on, we've pretty steadily been in that 80% or above. Like Julie mentioned when she spoke earlier, we can sometimes get hung up on words like all staff or all teachers. So that's something to take into consideration as well. But overall, we've been able to consistently maintain 88% of benchmarks in place over the last 5 years. So again, we kind of put that back to our leadership team and just kind of as an organization, how we've moved forward with just making it part of our practices with our staff. So any questions about that? All right. Okay, so what's next? Being that we have, that we're in our 7th year, we are still continuing to move forward with Pyramid. We want to make sure that we don't, fall off track here. So we have some priorities that we're working towards. The first one being parent representation. So we're working really hard to recruit a parent or family member. We just know how important it is for families to have a voice. We do have some members on the team that have dual. They're parents, but they're also teachers or leaders, in the organization. But we want to find a family member who doesn't also teach in the program. We are also working on establishing a problem-solving team to provide teachers support for students who maybe are experiencing more severe challenging behaviors. We want to get them support a little bit quicker. So we have started collaborating with our administrators and our district and teachers. So they'll come together if a teacher is experiencing, a severe challenging behavior. They can initiate a request for a problem-solving team, and it's a little less formal, but we can come together, find time to meet, and work through some different supports that we think might be helpful, while other formal processes are taking place behind the scenes. Let's see. Oh, the third one being expectations for adults. So I talked a little bit about that, but just like we have the expectations and rules for our students. We talked about how it could be beneficial for the adults to also create their matrix, just to help kind of create that cohesive team within the classroom, and kind of helps to improve the communication and accountability amongst the team members. And also modeling for our students that that adults also have, rules and expectations that are important for the classroom to be able to function as well. So something that we are going to work towards. And then the last thing being defining the roles and responsibilities. So those routines within routines for the teaching teams. And again, this kind of ties back to that accountability and improving communication within the classroom. So as part of the conversations around creating rules and expectations, we also thought that it was important for the teaching teams to define their roles and responsibilities for the adults. So for example, like if one teacher's leading large group, what is the other teacher going to be doing? Maybe sitting by Johnny to help provide praise and redirection, but really opening the door for them to have those conversations more naturally, rather than it being this teacher's not doing their job and I need them to be doing this. It just kind of helps open that door. So that's what we're working on next. And yeah, does anybody have any questions? Yes. So the question is do we know why we've used gold to as our student outcome data source? Julie? I'll let Julie answer that question.
We adopted gold. It's probably been about 10 years ago when we started. We started gold. We were using the paper and pencil form of it. So anybody that knows that that's quite a lot of work for teachers to do versus the online. I think the reason, we have very high expectations. And so we did our own research as far as, curriculum and assessment pieces that are research based. Our special education department uses it. And so I think, again, just trying to be partners with them with that weighed a lot into it. Being part of accredited through NACE also requires you to have a specific curriculum. And so I know decades ago, a lot of it in early childhood was trying to, kind of create that own project. So it was a lot on the teacher to try and do that. And so we also knew that the creative curriculum and gold helped the teacher be able to do that. So a lot of times we have people in our field that they may come from the banking industry or they may come from somewhere else, and we have to train them to be able to do that. And so this just gives us a good solid piece to be able to do that. So
I would just add on to that too, that our teachers use their goal data to inform their planning and communicate with families where developmentally their children are falling. So I think that gold has been really valuable for our program, even if it's not required for us by license or state. So yeah, just any other questions? Yeah. Good question.
So when we first did that to BOQ, when we got done here in Kearney and we went back to Omaha and got to work, that leadership team met and looked at, okay, we kind of prioritized what we needed to do in order to move this forward. So we wrote goals in the first year, I remember there was like 7 that we wrote specifically, okay, these are ones we're specifically going to hit. Maybe it was a specific question that we wanted to make sure that was in a survey. Maybe it was something specifically in a newsletter that we wanted to make sure parents were aware of. Maybe it was a staff engagement activity, something like that. And I think just each year, we go back and look at the BOQ and then determine, okay, yeah, we met that. This is what we did. And sometimes just personally, when we have that meeting and we sit down with this huge document, it can be a little daunting. It is not the most fun thing to go through. And sometimes when you have a larger group, there's lots of different opinions, but we've tried doing it lots of different ways. And so I think we get better at it each and every year, and it becomes more and more of just what we're doing. And so I think that's kind of how we've just kept moving the needle. And I think, like we had said before, sometimes we do get stuck on some of those words, but we've also just in this last year, I think, really been able to hone in on those things that we say, hey, this is the one we always point that we're not meeting. What is it intentionally that we can do? And so when we come to that meeting in April, we don't have to have that same answer. I know as an admin team, just in our own conversations, we point that out more often. So.
Yeah, so this is the actual BOQ document. And so you can see it's kind of broken down into different areas. And then within each one, there's a few different criteria that you would mark not in place, partially in place, in place. And so as you kind of read through those, you can see where there may be parts of that were being met, or maybe parts that you would still need to work towards. So those were usually the ones. And then there's some that you can, pretty easily say, yes, we do that. Yes, we do that. Yes, we do that. But that's what the document is. So yeah, 28 questions? Oh, 30 questions. So yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Any questions from anybody on there? Nope. Okay. Well,
It definitely wasn't right away.
Right.
It took us a while to get where we are now. So if you're in the process, just be patient. You'll get there. It takes time. And I think that's what we noticed with our benchmark too, was our first score. We were like, oh my gosh, we are not good at this yet. But eventually, I think we're to the point where we're really starting to feel good about what we're doing. And we're seeing it in our classrooms and with our families too. So.
I would also say that NDE has learned a lot in the last 7 years from when we started. They have changed kind of the process and reformalized, like bringing in, because I remember when we were here that first time and we were like, an implementation plan? What are you talking about? So some of that was really hard, but now, obviously we're not going through it again, but we've heard that there's definitely some different structure to it and different way of bringing people into the system, a little bit slower, a little easier, not such a crash course on that. So if you're thinking about it, I think it's great for early childhood. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. We appreciate it.